Thanks very much. So my name is Dan Cunningham. I work with Fiskars. Fiskars is a consumer branded company that makes a lot of paper crafting tools that appear in Michael's on their shelves. I'm an engineer with Fiskars, and so I've had my hands in a lot of the development of a lot of the products that we'll talk about today. And I have a pretty in-depth knowledge of kind of how they work. But at the same time, I've been doing over the last couple of years pretty frequent presentations to consumers like you about how our tools work and explaining them in a way that hopefully you'll remember. And next time you're at the store shelves at Michael's, you'll be able to look and see what the difference between a Fiskars tool and another tool might be. Joining me from Fiskars is Kelsey and Bree. They're both product managers with Fiskars. They'll be here to answer some questions that I might not have answers to. But otherwise, the way that this presentation is going to go is I'm going to kind of talk about paper, scissors, and trimmers today. It'll be maybe a 20-25 minute presentation of the tools themselves. I'll have some demonstrations here in front of me. I'll have another camera showing. And then afterward, we should have plenty of time for a question and answers with either me or with Kelsey or Bree. Along the way, if you do have questions, you can add them to the chat. And we'll either Kelsey, Bree, or someone will be able to answer them immediately if it's a simple question. But if it's going to be a question for me, then it might be a relevant time. Someone can chime in and ask me. Otherwise, I will come back at the end and be able to answer any questions that you might have. So without further ado, I think I can get into the real slides. So we're here to talk about getting crafty with paper, scissors, and trimmers. And to start, I kind of like to break up the two categories into the two things we're going to talk about, the scissors and trimmers. And at a very basic level, I think everyone might know what a scissors is. I mean, Fiskars is known for their orange-handled scissors, been around for 50 plus years in the US, and they're pretty high quality scissors. Trimmers, especially paper trimmers, are a little more specialty. They aren't as universal as scissors, but they're pretty basic as well. They have a platform and then a blade that makes the cut. So let's get into a little more detail about those two different things. So a pair of scissors, I said that everyone kind of knows what a scissors is, but in slightly more detail, there's three main aspects to a pair of scissors. There's the blades. Okay, yeah, those do the cutting. There's the handles. Yep, those are what you grab. And then there's the joint. That is the bit in the middle. Usually it's a screw that holds a pair of scissors so that they open in the correct way. Yes, sounds simple. But the engineer in me says, well, what's actually simple is never perfectly simple. They're often pretty complicated. And every one of these features can have different things associated with them. Blades have different kinds of materials. They're different amounts of hardness. The engineering term is the beam strength, how strong it is from bending, the camber, the grinds. There's all kinds of things about the blades. And then you move over to the handles, whether those are made of plastic or made of metal, how ergonomic they feel, whether they're for a lefty or for a righty, their textures, all of those things go into the design of a pair of scissor handles. And then the joint itself, kind of the secret sauce that nobody really thinks about, that's very important too. How tight that joint is extremely important, and how well a pair of scissors will cut thin material, thick material. It's all very important. So there's a lot of engineering that goes into all aspects of a pair of scissors. But at the same time, you really just think about them as blades, handles, and then some people think of the joints. On the flip side, a trimmer is pretty straightforward as well. You know, it's got three aspects. You've got this plate, or where you would put the grid. That's where you would put the material that you're going to cut. It has a blade that slides along and does the actual cutting. And there's a couple different kinds of blades, which we'll talk about. And then there's almost always a way to see exactly where you're going to cut. So different things might be, if you've got this cut line indicator, it might be an edge of a metal rail. There might be a cutting bar, or Fiskars has what's called the sure cut wire. We'll kind of get into the details of those as we go along. But then the grid might be large or smaller with a fold out ruler, or there's a lot of different things that you can do with the grid. And the blade, there are a couple different types of ways to make the cuts, which we will get into detail along the way. So All of these features get combined, whether you're talking about with trimmers or with scissors, they're all combined into a single product. So there's a lot of different products out on the shelf. How do you know which product to choose? Well, this next section is going to tell you kind of how to choose the right tool for the job, maybe as a first tool that you buy for paper crafting, or even the 10th tool that you buy for paper crafting. So when you go to purchase a new tool, you go to the store shelves, and you can see this array of things, both Fiskars and other companies. What should you buy? First question you just ask yourself is, what type of paper are you going to cut? Because this is about paper cutting. You know, this is what we're going to talk about today. But as a background, paper comes in a lot of different what's called weights. They talk about them as GSM, which you don't need to worry about, but the numbers range from like 10 to a couple hundred, and those numbers don't usually make a lot of sense. Most people think about them as how heavy they feel. A piece of copy paper, pretty standard white piece of paper, that's going to be around 80 GSM. So it's actually pretty thin. Even thinner is tissue paper. If you think you're going to do a mixed media craft, you might use some tissue paper. That's even lighter and flimsier. But you can work your way up. If you have decorative papers, like crafting, this is a little bit heavier cardstock. This is maybe around 200. You get even higher and you get into the kind of the real mixed media stuff. You start getting into illustration board or chipboard, and these can be a couple hundred of these GSM. But it makes this spectrum of heavy to lightweight, or light to heavyweight: paper, cardstock, chipboard. The tools that you should use for each of these types of paper, they're not always universal. So if you're looking at scissors and trimmers, if you look at the really lightweight side, basic scissors, great for that. They even go up to cardstock. So a basic pair of scissors, you can pick it up, and you've done this, you know, you can easily control. It's not too difficult to cut. It's not too hard to squeeze. You can even sometimes layer multiple sheets of whatever the lighter paper is and have no issues with a basic pair of scissors. But if you start getting to the heavier stuff, let's say you've got heavier cardstock or corrugated cardboard, now a regular basic pair of scissors might not make the cut. Pun intended there, but it may be something that you need to upgrade. It could be that it's too hard to squeeze through heavy material, or it shifts the material as you're cutting them. Those are some issues that you might have with heavier or more layers. Similarly, basic trimmers are going to do the lightweight stuff just fine. But there are some specialty heavy-duty trimmers that are designed to actually cut through, you know, cardboard or this illustration paper or chipboard. So there's this broad spectrum. Digging a layer deeper, let's talk about typical paper. So if we're going to be cutting typical copy paper, maybe even up into the craft paper, the decorative paper that you might get at Michael's in a big set. These kinds of papers can be done either with scissors or trimmers. And really, most any pair of scissors will be able to get the job done. We have a range of scissors that can do the job. Those range from what we would call our performance level scissors, where they are kind of a lower cost version, but they may struggle with some heavier papers, all the way up to the Premier, which is kind of our higher end of the scissors, which are going to be a little more bent of a handle. You can kind of tell they're a little more bent, but they're going to be able to cut any of these typical papers with no problems. In the middle, I like to point out the Easy Action scissors, which are pretty, they're a lot like our premiums. The blades are kind of the same, but they include a spring within the handle. And so these are going to automatically open up as you cut. Now, these are pretty handy for when you're doing a lot of repetitive cutting. This is going to let you set it onto a tabletop and press down to be able to do a lot of these cuts repetitively. They do lock and close up. And a nice feature that they have received is in the Arthritis Association's ease of use commendation, basically saying that the Arthritis Association has evaluated this Easy Action scissor to say that people with arthritis have an easier job doing their tasks with this pair of scissors. So these are quite handy. The performance line, like I mentioned, they're kind of that top of the line scissors for Fiskars. We have some additional special editions, you could say. They have these beautiful colors and textures. The ones They come out pretty frequently. The ones currently at Michael's are, we have a pair of glitter scissors, which is kind of a little trickier to see. Let me flip over, see if this is a little bit easier. Oh yeah, so you can see that these have quite a glittery shine to them. Very impressive in person, and yet they're not rough, they're not scratchy or anything. They've got a nice, pretty smooth finish. Or you've got these decorative handles that these are colored, and this is an intrinsic color. It's not just like a coating. This is the plastic itself was colored, so it's not going to wear out. But it's in the body of our normal Premier pair of scissors. Oh, this one's even shorter. But our Premier 8 or 9-inch pair of scissors are going to have this beautiful decoration on it. So those are nice when you like to kind of spice up your crafting table with some nice, beautiful colors. Going back to typical paper cutting, let's go to the flip side and look at trimmers. In reality, every trimmer that Fiskars makes is designed to cut typical papers amazingly. Does a great job. This is where we can kind of talk about several of the different types of cutting. And the first I have highlighted there is bypass. And this is something that you've probably have used to from, everyone as a kid has seen these at school. Even for the last 100 years, these have been around. They just have a long blade that slices down against the edge of the table. And it's got a metal edge on here. And you always know exactly where it's going to cut, because that metal blade underneath is where it's going to cut. But the problem with that sometimes is when you put a piece of paper on top of it, now it's kind of hard to see where it's going to cut. So it might not be exactly the easiest one to use, but it's going to be a good universal powerhouse that's going to be able to make lots of cuts. The next side of things is a rotary paper trimmer. Now the rotary paper trimmer is very similar. It's got the large grid. This has a bar that flips down. Oh, didn't open this out of the package, but and it's got a carriage in here with a small circular blade inside, kind of like a razor sharp pizza cutter. And as you push down on the top of the thing, top of the carriage, it pushes the blade down into the paper and you slice it across and it makes a good clean cut. That sort of razor blade does eventually wear out a plate underneath inside the trimmer. So you can buy replacement plates for underneath that, and as well as replacement trimmer blades. In this, you can see that they're just a circular razor blade. Those don't happen very often, but it is possible for you to do that. Now, going to kind of our highest end of things is what we're calling the sure cut trimmers. And these sure cut trimmers have the thing I mentioned before, the sure cut paper, the cut line indicator. And I'm going to flip to the other camera to demonstrate this. But when you open this and put a piece of paper in to cut, once again, you're going to be covering that paper, so it might not be as easy to see. But ooh, that's really bright. You can see right down the center of the cut. Turn down this light a little bit. See if that helps. Down the center of the cut is a very thin and very strong wire that runs exactly down the center, and the blade that cuts goes right over that wire. Let's see if I open this and put it against black. You can see the wire. You can kind of see the very thin wire in there, but it's very obvious when you have a paper under it. But once you've got it in line, that sure cut metal wire that runs right in the cut line is exactly where this blade is going to cut. This blade is a very small razor blade right at the tip that will slice right through, and there's nothing to wear out because it actually cuts through a channel in the bottom. So these razor blades don't have to be replaced as often like the rotary blades might have to be, because they're actually pushing against something. But you've got this added benefit of a nice cut line right exactly in line with where you're going to cut. So that's really helpful, especially when you're doing a paper craft that needs really high accuracy. So that's the typical paper. Oh, and here's an animation that can kind of show you a little bit more detail of that sure cut wire indicator for that line. You can kind of see that right there. Now, let's say you want to cut more than one piece of paper. You've only got a stack of cards that you're making that you want to cut more at the same time. Sometimes these tools aren't going to do quite as well with multiple as they would with a single, especially scissors. Scissors are tricky because as you add more and more layers, sometimes thin paper will tend to what I would call slip between the blades. If you've ever been cutting and you get nearly to the tip and you're squeezing and one piece of paper folds under instead of actually getting cut. That's because you're cutting a large stack of paper. Now, we understand that that does happen. And so we designed a pair of scissors called the Amplify scissors. And the Amplify has an interesting, cool technology inside built into the pair of scissors that allow them to cut multiple layers very quick or very easily and very robustly. So the magic has to do with a special extra feature built into the scissors, but you don't have to do anything. It automatically senses when there's many layers, and it automatically adjusts itself to cut those many layers effectively. And then when you're done cutting, it goes back to the normal pair of scissors. So if you have multiple layers of even fabrics, these will do a great job all the way to the tip of cutting multiple layers of fabric with no concerns at all. And so these Amplify scissors are quite the powerhouse tools for when you're going to cut multiple layers of paper or fabrics or other types of things like that. But what about paper trimmers? So paper trimmers, when you're going to cut multiple layers, that's when we go back to some of these other ones where we have the bypass type blade. Remember this one? So this type of blade will slice multiple pieces of paper pretty effectively. It does a great job. And we even go to the deluxe bypass, includes a measurement stop that you can do lots and lots of pieces of paper both simultaneously and sequentially, because you can just put it back into that stop. So those are pretty handy for the stacks of paper. And now, what if you still only have one paper, but it's a heavy piece of paper? It's this corrugated cardboard, or it's even this illustration paper, which is very, it's just a thick, maybe 2 or even 3 millimeters thick of this cardboard that isn't corrugated. It's very tough. At that point, it's not always the tool that fails, but sometimes it's also the hand strength. It's the ergonomics of it. You might not be strong enough to cut, especially all the way to the tip. Well, we have understood that. Again, that problem is something that a lot of people have, and we came out with a product line called Power Cut. Now, this is in addition to Amplify. Amplify is a very great tool for cutting heavy-duty paper because it itself is a heavy-duty tool. It's got large, thick beams. It's got a good joint, but it does not necessarily reduce how much hand strength you need in order to make those cuts in the thick paper. So we came up with the Power Cut shears. So Power Cut shears have a funny shaped blade. You can see they almost look like a pair of bunny ears. The reason that we have the strange shaped blades like this is we are making the cut just as easy to cut at the tip as it is at the start. And if you've ever cut hard things with a regular pair of scissors, way in the back, it's pretty easy to start. It's when you get halfway, or even, especially to that tip, it's really difficult to make those cuts. But in reality, with these pairs of this shape of scissor blade, the start of the cut and the end of the cut feel the same. And that way you feel you have more control over it. You're able to cut to the tip without stopping, without having to reposition your hands and squeeze differently. That cut is just, at the tip is just as easy as it is at the base. So it's this technology of these funny shaped blades that let you cut all the way to the tip with that extra strength. And we actually say it cuts twice as easy at the tip as a regular pair of scissors. And that's true. What about trimmer side of things? Heavy paper. If you've ever tried to use one of these bypass types of trimmers, you know that sometimes they can gum up, or it takes a lot of force to cut through that heavy paper. Well, this is where we go back to, and I mentioned the rotary, this kind that has the razor pizza blade inside. You push down on it. Now you can just push a little bit and slide it, and it's going to make a little slice. And you're actually able to make back and forth. If it's really hard, you can go back and forth, kind of like if you've ever used a craft knife. You can take multiple passes to get through really thick material. You can't do that with most other paper trimmers because it's kind of a slice all the way through. Now, that's one way to cut through things with thick things with the rotary blade. But we also know that people do like to make one slice and be able to cut all the way through. So we made a hybrid of a rotary blade and a bypass blade, and affectionately called it a rotary bypass. Now, the rotary bypass is a tool that, let me flip over to this camera. It has a blade up against a rail, and you can kind of see the blade inside there. It's up against the edge of a metal rail in here. And as it goes past, it's rolling at the same time. It's sliding on the outside of this rail. And so what that action does is it allows it to roll in the same way that a rotary does, but it also allows it to slice in the same way that a bypass does. And it can cut through a thick piece of cardboard with in a single pass with hardly any effort. It really doesn't take very much at all. And it can do so repeatedly right against the edge of this thing with really very, very few issues at all. Now, we've had the larger version of this rotary bypass with a large fold out grid on this side with lots of measurements. It goes out to 13 inches. It's a little more costly. And so it just new this year is the smaller version. You can see it above with a fold out ruler. So it still can measure out to that 13, but it's much more compact. And at Michael's, it's nearly half the price of the larger one. And so it's kind of an upgrade in a couple ways, but it's the same cutting feature with a rotary bypass blade. So very handy. Now, we know in a lot of mixed media crafting, even though it's paper, there's some interesting specialty paper out there, whether it's glitter paper. It could be, embedded with a lot of little metal flake on it. Could be adhesive-backed paper that can get pretty sticky. And so a lot of people like to cut that, and sometimes that can definitely hurt the ability for the tools to do that for a very long time. So we have come out with some scissors that include you can see the consistency across the top is they all have these black blades. What the black are is, and I can show them, they actually say non-stick right on them. This is a special coating that prevents things from sticking to it. And it is actually very chemically similar to Teflon, the stuff that you coat pans with to get food to slide right off of. So same concept. If you've got a gummy piece of paper that you're cutting through and that gumminess, the sticky adhesive may have gotten on the surface of the blade, well, it won't stick. And whether it even takes you even wiping it off, you probably don't even have to. It probably just doesn't even stick. So both the inside of the blade is coated as well as the outside. And there's several different kinds. These Premier, even the decorative Premier have them. The Performance line of scissors, we have a line of the Performance with that same black nonstick blade. And then there's one other, which is an interesting one. It says Total Control. That's a funny shaped pair of scissors. Let me point this one out. So it has the black non-stick coating on the surface, but it's got this funny shape because we've seen people do a lot of what's called fussy cutting when you're doing a lot of very intricate curves around a feature, whether this example shows cutting out a world map. And often when you're doing fussy cutting, you're concentrating, you want a lot of control, but you're also doing it for a long time. Sometimes it's multiple, in the fabric world, it's cutting out applique. So you're cutting out shapes out of a piece of fabric for you to then iron or sew onto a quilt, for instance. The white version is often used for paper crafting, but having your ability to wrap your whole hand around it, kind of the whole squeeze fist grip, gives you so much control. It's not just holding it with the fingertips like a regular pair of scissors. This gives you full control from the wrist down. And then using your thumb, you can just move that thumb using a very strong muscle right here. It's one of your strongest muscles in your hands in order to make that action and be able to do that for a longer period of time. So you have more control to make more intricate cuts, as well as you use a strong muscle that'll let you do this cut for a longer period of time. So this is a handy Total Control scissors that it's also pretty small compared to some of the other scissors that you can toss, and use it in those special cases when you do some fussy cutting. Now, of course, specialty paper, we can do something with trimmers. And I like to point out the sure cut in this case. So remember, the sure cut is the one that is a very small razor blade within, and it slides right along a wire, that tight, strong wire. The reason I like to use the sure cut with specialty paper is because it's actually very easily and inexpensively replaceable, the blades. So the sure cut has this blade carriage. It slides up and down. And to replace it, there is one spot. You put it in the carriage, the rack, and you pull out the carriage. And it's a very small blade in there. And so it eventually gets dull, especially if you're cutting something with, glitter flake or something that it would potentially wear out the blade edges or gum up the edges. But it's very straightforward. You can buy 2 packs of these replacement blades, and you just do the reverse of what you did the first time. You slide it into place, and it's back in business. It's back in action with a brand new blade, nice and sharp. So that's why I say that if you're looking to cut specialty paper with a trimmer, our sure cut's a sure bet. Accidental. Now, there is another tool that is in the Michaels bay where you can purchase with the paper crafting stuff, but it's not a scissor or a trimmer. But here I can talk about it a little bit. Anyone who's done quilting or fabric crafts probably know about rotary cutters. And rotary cutters are a pizza cutter that you really don't want to mess with. This is a razor sharp round blade that you would then press up against a mat and then make the cut. And so you can do that with single pieces of paper where you hold them, and you can even do some curves with that. Or you can do it with a ruler. So if you have a ruler that you would lay it against this, the idea is you would push it up against the side of the ruler and slice through, and it makes nice straight cuts through many, many different kinds of materials. Whether it's, this foam, this is just a craft foam. This just cuts right through with a nice straight edge, or multiple layers of cork. This is cork, and again, it gives no resistance. Even all the way up to, remember this hard illustration paper or craft paper. This is where if you put a little more pressure on it, it just cuts right through, pretty much like butter. This tool does have a guard that you would slip up in place. So now that orange guard is around the silver, you can see it's safe. Nothing can push it this way until you take this and push it downward and then slide it backward to pull it back. So you can leave it on the table safe, so you don't feel worried about, your cat jumping up or your child or grandchild jumping, and grabbing and messing with stuff on your craft table. It can be safe, but at the same time, it's a very powerful, strong, and precise cutting tool. Back. So kind of in big summary, for paper crafting tools in general, we have the scissors in the top row. We've talked about every one of those things, including the rotary now at the end of that row. We have a lot of trimmers, whether they are designed for precision or efficiency or heavy duty materials. And then we also have some craft knives. We actually next Friday have a presentation on the variety of knives that Fiskars has. But actually, a lot of these are new at Michaels for 2021. And so you can see where those green stars showed up. They are new. And so some of the features we talked about are new to Michaels for 2021. So that's pretty exciting, and it might get you to take a second look at the paper crafting aisle. If you're an old hat and have been there many, many times, take a second look, because there might be something new there. And so again, the tool school for the craft knives is next week, November 12th. You can look for that on the Michaels website as well. So as a final view, this is kind of the way the Fiskars area in the paper crafting Michaels Bay looks like. You can see a big wash of orange. Fiskars orange is very iconic. There's a few little things of white packaging, and you can actually see there's some, it looks like some brown cardboard packaging. Those are some new, we're exploring recycled packaging. So that's some excitement that are new for 2021 as well. So, next time you're walking down that paper crafting aisle, I hope that some of the things you've learned in this little tool school will be able to help you see the difference between one pair of scissors and another, or one trimmer and another, or Fiskars branded stuff and other companies. So thanks for joining. And like I said, we have plenty of time for Q&As. And so hopefully we've got some opportunities to ask me as an engineer, or we've got Kelsey and Bree here in the chat as well, to be able to answer some of the maybe the more product line related questions. So thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Dan, we have one question about the rotary bypass cutter. Can it cut artboard canvas?
Artboard canvas. And if you are meaning like the fabric-y canvas stuff that's stretched over like a frame for you then to do painting on, yes, this can cut through that, because it's actually, I think that's more closer to a paper than a fabric. And this should be able to do that. I don't have any right here with me that I know of. Peek through some of these drawers here. I got materials, but I would say yes, it should be able to do that. It's a pretty robust tool.
Awesome. Then we have a question from Michelle. So she has a very old rotary trimmer that is a dark gray and orange. The bar at the bottom is curling up on one side. What should she replace with it?
So dark gray and orange. I happen to have, I'm not sure exactly what model that is, but I know Fiskars actually makes, and it'll depend on how big of a wheel that rotary blade is. So this one that I have here, this is a 28 millimeter blade. And so that is just a little more than an inch. Versus there's another kind that's almost a 2-inch blade. It's actually this size blade. That's a 45 millimeter blade. Now there are two different models of trimmers that have that, but both of those types of models have different kinds of replacement bars underneath and replacement kits for the trimmer blades themselves. I'm actually not sure, I didn't look up before, I'm not positive what replacement ones they carry in stores at Michael's, but that's where I would check first. If you match the size of that blade, whether you're replacing the blade or you're replacing the bar underneath, you should be able to find them. They should be available. This black one is for the 45 millimeter, and it's actually nice in that this accommodates 4 different cutting sides. So the trimmer itself has a deeper pit that you can pull this out, rotate it 1 turn or 1/4 turn, and then put it back in and get a fresh new cut. But then this is the 28 millimeter, and it is just intended to be just a 2-sided, I think it's 2-sided. So you can flip it over and put it back in. So I hope that helps. I know I can't give you links right now, but hopefully knowing the difference between those 2 sizes, you might be able to sleuth out the replacement parts you need. Otherwise, Fiskars does have a really good customer service. And so if you have something that you can't find, we're often really great, and you send a picture and we'll be able to look stuff up. And as an engineer, I'm frequently helping our customer service team find old models or things like that and be able to help with some of those.
Awesome. Another question, any tricks to keep the paper cutting blades sharp longer?
I have heard things like, and maybe you've heard this, that cutting wax paper or parchment paper might help keep your blade sharp. I'm not sure that is true. I don't think it'll hurt the blades, and there may be some truth to it, because wax paper especially has, wax as a lubricant. And so it'll help things from scratching against metal on metal. But I don't have any data to support that theory. So I can't say that those tricks wouldn't work, but I'm not going to say that they will work. Now, things that we know will work is sometimes like I mentioned, the specialty paper, those often have more abrasive materials within them, whether they're the adhesive really can gum up the blades, or like I said, the flakes in for instance, either glitter paper, or this is a handcrafted paper, and this is it's called a handmade paper, and it includes a metal flake as well. Those are going to wear out your blades faster. And so what I like to have is, if you can spare it, a trimmer or a set of blades that are dedicated to these really messy specialty papers that you don't use on your regular paper, because your regular paper won't wear out your blades very fast at all, whereas these specialty papers will do the most, I say damage, but it's just going to wear them out a little faster. So keeping 2 tools on hand is kind of what I try to do. And when I get to these really tough, or the gooey ones or things like that, I pull out the one that is intended for that, because I know that it's going to be a messier job. I hope that helps.
Yes. Scissors question. What scissors would you recommend for people with weak thumbs?
Oh, weak thumbs. That's an interesting question. I would 100% recommend the Easy Action line of scissors. Let me go back to that slide, because there is more than one model of that Easy Action. And I'll show. There is this version with what I'm showing here, and then there's also a smaller version, which I laid out. Oh yeah, here it is. A smaller version, which is this size. And both of these lines have springs in them. And that means you're not using your thumb at all. It is all palm and finger motions in order to do these cuts. So that's part of the reason that whole line of Easy Action received the arthritis commendation, because whether you have weak thumbs doesn't really matter. You're using kind of these large, gross, big grip motion rather than trying to just move that thumb in and out. So you're holding it more. So look for the Easy Action technology, as well as that ease of use commendation on the packaging.
All right. A little bit of a tactical question. So how do you use the trimmer to make the 5x7 size?
So most trimmers have either a swing out arm or a larger grid at the bottom that can accommodate that. And what you would then do would be to take your paper and line it up to the 5-inch mark, because these marks on the ruler for either the larger grid or the ruler itself are aligned to exactly where that cut should happen. And so to make that 5x7, first you would feed it in to that 5-inch mark, make the cut, then you would pull it back out, rotate it, and feed it all the way to that 7-inch mark, close it, make the cut, and then you would have a 5x7 piece of paper with 2 extra little scraps. Sorry, I hope that explains it.
Yes. Do any of the models, trimmer models, have an attachment to score paper?
That's a good question. So Kelsey Bree, I might have to refer to you. Whether I know in the past, our triple track or the Sure Cut did have scoring blades available that you could buy. I don't think any of our trimmers come naturally with one of those blades, but they were an accessory that you could add and just slot it, like buying a replacement, you could just slot it in place. Is that still the case?
I do not think so, but we will keep that in mind for future development.
Yes, yes, we will.
I think that is all of the questions for right now.
Okay, very good. Yeah, we hit right around the time that I was thinking it would be. We've been 40 minutes. So I really appreciate your time. And thank you, Michaels, for allowing us to come on and kind of talk about the technologies of a lot of our products and all of our paper crafting tools. And again, I hope you all have learned something in the differences between one pair of scissors and another, one trimmer and another. And now you could look at it and say, oh, I remember he talked about this. This is like a razor sharp pizza cutter. So if you take nothing else out of it, at least you can remember some of those little tidbits of knowledge. So thank you very much for your time.